on their careers, and then thereafter sort of their investments into different technology companies when technology and content companies started to collide. And we've always sort of proudly sort of flown the Australian flag in the United States, which is where we met James, and I'll come back to James. But relevant to that era, in that sort of 13-year period, I was 9 years in LA, and then I actually moved to Silicon Valley, and the reason we did that was because we were just getting consistently bombarded with opportunities out of Silicon Valley, technology companies and technology financiers that were interested in essentially trying to bridge the gap between Hollywood and Silicon Valley. And I felt strongly that I needed to live there and immerse myself in the community to understand both what Silicon Valley is, how it operates, how it thinks, its history, and how it can indeed integrate with Hollywood. And just a bit of a data point for you, which is relevant. The distance between Hollywood and Silicon Valley in California is 348 miles. It's a lovely drive. But for many, many years, the communities have just been absolutely worlds apart. They haven't understood each other, but now they really do understand each other. And I'm going to talk to history a little bit because it's very relevant to current. But really curiously, I woke up this morning to some news, which essentially, when I was thinking about the history of Hollywood, the history of Silicon Valley, and in particular the history of the intersection of Hollywood and Silicon Valley, I've been thinking about what happened in the different generations and the different eras of both communities. And the news this morning that Larry Ellison, through one of his family vehicles, for most of you, if you don't know, is the founder of Oracle, which is, to give it a label, a software company out of Silicon Valley originally, has just acquired Paramount Global, which is the owner of CBS, one of Hollywood's greatest and most famous and earliest companies, that started in the 1920s. That day being today, curiously the day of this panel, is probably the single biggest day in the history of Hollywood and Silicon Valley's integration. So it's remarkably fascinating, frankly, that happened this morning, and we're sitting here on because it will. This day's been coming, but the fact that it happened today and what's going to happen here on after is I think this day will be remembered. If we sat here in 20 years' time, I think that this day will be remembered as a truly formative day. If, for example, someone looked at the history of Hollywood and Silicon Valley in the last 50 years, they would point to this day being one of the top 5 days of all time. So it's just a pleasure, frankly, to think about it and talk about it in the context of this panel. Just some other introductory remarks on history. So Hollywood, for those of you that don't know, was technically sort of commenced as an industry in 1911, but the 1920s were the first industry that really got going. A lot of the studios that are big global studios that have made movies and television shows that you'd all would have loved and do love. I'm staring at a screen of all of Stephen's credits here, which I don't know if you can see the same thing. Many of which Stephen has been integral in making. It's been going now 100 years, and in particular, though, in the 1990s is when sort of tech really started to properly and deeply integrate into Hollywood. On the Silicon Valley front, the 1970s really is when sort of Silicon Valley took off, and then, of course, just every year thereafter, its progression and momentum has been incredible. But you can't probably see it very well, but in my scribble notes here, the intersection of the two of them, there was a period of time about 5 years ago when the two communities really, I would say, it's my personal opinion only, really found common ground. I think sort of the courting was sort of concluded as such, and they were sort of really deeply, heavily in business together. And then obviously today is the big day where I think the sort of the integration is essentially complete. I just wanted to speak briefly to the 4 categories of people and just items of information that are relevant to the intersection, which will be relevant today. I think about talent, as in the people that the incredible talented creatives who actually appear in the various television shows and films and other forms of content that we've all enjoyed over the years. I think about the people, the families and the companies and the governments also that finance content. I think about the content itself, and then I think about the technology. And in those 4 lanes, they've all been interestingly having their own inflection points in growth between the 2 communities of Hollywood and Silicon Valley. But as I said, I think we've now sort of reached that point where they're properly sort of in bed and know each other very well. I might pause there and just introduce Stephen. The reason we chose Stephen, and Stephen O is Stephen's full name, is that he's one of the true leaders of this actual intersection. His company, XM2, which he'll tell you about, has been involved with some incredible movies that A, you can see on the screen, and B, just the ones that I wrote down, Bond 007, Mission Impossible, Star Wars, John Wick, and many others. How Stephen has thought about technology and its intersection with Hollywood and content broadly he's been a real prime mover. There's a particular sentence here which is, I find just incredible that we're here to hear about this journey, and that is that XM2 is the world's first and only complete aerial solution provider, sort of for Hollywood, if you will. You're going to hear today how Stephen has gone about that and what he's doing now. And I did ask Stephen to speak to, in particular, his own history in creating this company, because history is very relevant to this topic of Hollywood and Silicon Valley. I'll pass over to Stephen shortly, but to my right, James Hoppy has a company called Maker Films. We've actually known each other about 40 years, but reconnected in Hollywood. For one particular client who's a very significant Australian-born global actor, James and his financial partners acquired the independent production company rights for that person. And so we've had a fabulous set of dealings thereafter, and then fast forward to when I returned to California, to live and work in Australia. James and his family have kindly supported us at EMT and invested in our growth, and you'll hear a bit about James's story from the content and the talent side, whereas Stephen will speak to the technology side. So with all that being said, that's the end of my introduction. Stephen, firstly, congratulations on all of this. It's a lot. We'd love to hear your story, please. And as I mentioned prior, after you take your time to explain how you've gone about this and what you're up to, we'll get into some Q&A.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me come here and share my story with you guys. Pictures say 1,000 words, videos, I think it's 1 million+ words. So I'll show you a video first of my works. So that post with all the movies on it, we need another 3-4 more pages to show you all the works we've done. I'm pretty certain that you've seen some of those movies. I'm very proud that we were able to do such movies and take part in such things, and more proud that it's a Melbourne-based company that is doing all these things. And myself, I was actually assembled in Melbourne, imported parts from South Korea. I was born in Melbourne. I'm 100% dinky dye Australian. I was born on the other side of town in Brunswick. I grew up in Essendon. Now I live on the other side of town in Glen Iris, and my office is in Oakley. That's the headquarters. Now we have offices in Los Angeles, Atlanta, London, and also South Korea. South Korea, we opened that office earlier this year, and I'm going to try to stop opening more offices. I think that's enough, because I spend too much time abroad. So it's actually rare for me to be home like this. But we have a Hollywood movie shooting in Melbourne that starts on Monday next week. Very exciting. I haven't done a big movie in Australia or in Melbourne for a long, long time. But my company at the moment, at this present point in time, we are currently working on 5 other projects simultaneously. We're on, I can't mention those names because it's going to broadcast, but another 4 Hollywood big blockbusters. The company's now evolved, so we started with drones, and I'll talk quickly to that story, but now we do more than just drones. On the shooting space, which we call XM2 Cine, we do filming from helicopters, jet planes that travel at 750 k's an hour, to arm cars, to specialized equipment that the world does not have. And, this is where technology is the enabler for us to penetrate a market that's very, very fiercely, very competitive. How many people want to knock on Hollywood's door and try to enter there? In a very short period of time, we got to the very pointy end of where we are at right now and are acknowledged in that space, and I'll go through that journey. But the company's evolved. We have a company called XM2 Earth that does industrial drones. We have drones that can fly for 1 week. I have drones that act as cell towers during emergency crises that we sell to Verizon and some other telcos around the world. Only one of its kind, and I'll speak to that. We have a VFX side of things where visual effects in movies in Hollywood is becoming more and more evident. It's taking a big chunk out of the actual physical filming, and we saw that years and years ago. Developed equipment and technologies here in Melbourne, out of Melbourne, and once again, we do a lot of the work in that space, as you saw before. And then we have R&D development here in Melbourne. If you come to my place in Oakley, if you go out the back, you'll smell a lot of WD-40. We have CNC milling, routing, and electronic design and assembly, and we have all those facilities out in Oakley.
Stephen, if I may, just one question on the point you raised about sort of selling into Hollywood, if you will. I think that as a theme, the Silicon Valley sort of community getting to know Hollywood and vice versa, you heard in my remarks that it's taken quite some time to sort of reach this point, and there's still some ways to go. But for you, and I love that it's an Australian story into Hollywood, it's not easily done. I can speak to that myself, but I'm curious on that sort of, hi, I'm Stephen, I have some incredible technology ideas and integrations for the global content sector. How was that as an experience? Firstly, getting access into Hollywood, and secondly, convincing the major studios and now the streamers and others to get into business with you? Because I would sort of preface that question with stating that for the most part, in my experience, Hollywood's a closed shop. It's very hard to get in there. It's very hard to get people's attention. It's very hard to get their trust. Was it just that your idea and the technology was such a standout that you were able to cut through all of that, or was it different?
Hollywood is a very hard place to enter. It's a very big boys' club, so to speak. If you haven't worked in there before, they don't want to speak to you. You can have the best idea in the world, and they're not going to want to see it. So entry into there took a little bit of guts and determination, and I don't know the word in English. It's in Korean. It's gojip. It's like stubbornness. And I kept pounding on that door. Yes, that. But we kept pounding on the door, and we started getting through. And after every little success, we kept pushing it. But we did that with technology. What I saw in there was a big gaping hole of, that's very easy to resolve, but no one's resolving it. I think it's because we looked at it from a different angle. a different viewpoint, and we saw solutions that others couldn't see. It's like when you're doing a maths problem, you can't figure it out, but your friend comes over, oh, you just did that. Well, that's sort of what happened to us. And we had capabilities that the world did not have. And when the world doesn't have it, they have no choice but to come to you, but they need to listen. And the initial period of time when you speak to these people is they've got the hands over their ears and they don't want to listen because they think they know everything. And that's what we had to break. Once that's broken, then they start understanding and listening. Oh, I don't know everything. I'll listen to what you have to say. Then all of a sudden things open up. I worked with Martin Scorsese. That gentleman does everything. He's awesome, but never worked with drones. It was the first time he used drones was with my company and myself. And I remember that day I had to sit down and explain to him what drones do. Now that gentleman normally knows everything and won't listen to someone trying to teach him something, but he did. He opened up, listened, and thus we do work. And we've worked with many famous big directors and DPs around the world via doing this type of thing. And I think the most important part out of all of it, I have not failed once in any deliverable that I have promised. And because of that, now people believe everything that I promise. But I'm not going to promise that I can't deliver. Right? Now, that doesn't mean that I don't stay up all night with my guys and figure it out. And, my hair's already fallen out, but they're pulling their hairs out. It doesn't mean that doesn't happen. That happens. Sorry for the word, but you got to bust your balls. Right? Really put your elbow grease in there to make it happen. But I don't fail on a promise. And that's what's got to where we are, I think. And that's embedded over there in people's mind that know of us. Oh, you can trust that company. That Melbourne-based company that started in Melbourne, they speak in a funny accent. You can trust those guys. And I think that's a story in Hollywood, actually. There are so many Australian companies that do so well because I think Aussies keep their promise.
Yeah, and obviously clear, Stephen, from the movies that we just sort of saw some trailers of and some components of that, you are at the forefront of the global filmmaking industry. But to my earlier remarks as to where Hollywood and Silicon Valley are at in their coexistence, if you will, so a two-part question. Question one is, it's my understanding that many of the great Silicon Valley technologies were not created per se for Hollywood, but have been embraced by Hollywood. And then secondly, there have been many technologies and sort of related digital initiatives that have been created for and with Hollywood. In your case, did you create these technologies and these offerings and the services initially for the content industries, or were they created for other reasons but happened to be if you will, a Silicon Valley Hollywood match when you got into the community and understood their requirements?
We developed for Hollywood. We developed for the film industry, for the production industry. Maybe I'll go through some of this very quickly, but it started off with I'll skip these. So we did John Wick 4 and all that car sequence, and we developed a lot of tech for that. No Time to Die and all that. I'll just rush through this, and I'll come back to this one. But for example, let me get here. Okay, so how it started. Before these little white drones came about, this was my hobby. These are about 2 meters long. They'll fly at 180 kilometers per hour. Objective is to fly it as close to the ground as possible without crashing it. They were very expensive, $5,000 to $7,000 a piece. And if they touched the ground, you lost it, and you're going to rebuild it for another 3 weeks and cry a little bit and do it again. That was my hobby for the last 30 years. And then, as you can see, this is real time. It's not sped up or anything. You see the leaves moving at real time. So I did this every Friday and Saturday at the club. Then these little guys came about, but that carried a little old version 1 GoPro. Very, very small. It didn't work for the film industry. Film industry wants bigger and larger cameras. So we developed the first 25 kilo drone in the world. Back then it was a Red Epic 4K, I think they called it a Dragon back then. That was the smallest of the cinema quality cameras. We built the gimbal. It's all virtually handmade. And we made this 25 kilo, 55 pound drone. And then we started shooting movies like Kate Winslet's Dressmaker, David Attenborough's The Reef and so forth. Then I went over to India, and then we shot Lion with Dev Patel and all those guys, and that was good fun. And then I got a call, Pirates of the Caribbean were coming to Australia. Got introduced to those guys. They wanted to fly this camera, 4 times more heavy. The drone needs to be 40 kilos to fly this thing. The gentleman said to me that you've got 3 weeks to figure it out. I said 3 weeks to figure out something the world hasn't seen before. So we went hard at it and we worked it out. I actually sent one of my staff to South Korea, Seoul, to pick up components because it was faster than DHL. So what he did was he flew on a flight, landed in Incheon Seoul Airport. The gentleman with the part gave him the part. He went back in 2 hours later or 3 hours later. He jumped on the flight and flew straight back. He didn't even leave the airport. That's how much short time we had to develop this thing. We developed it, and then we flew on this project for 6 months. Then Hollywood started trusting us. Hollywood started believing us, because that was the start of the promises. I can do it in 3 weeks, something that was totally impossible. And we developed a drone, and the gentleman there called it the Johnny drone. And we shot there for 6 months. Disney was very rapt with it. They never saw such things before. Initially, it was for 3 weeks worth of work. We finished the 3 weeks. I jumped on a plane from Gold Coast to Melbourne. At Melbourne Airport, the bags come out on the ground floor. Well, as the bags were coming out, I got my phones going ding, 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 ding. All these messages are coming. And the producer said, go back upstairs, jump on the plane, come straight back. So 3 weeks turned into 6 months. So that was the initial entry, and then we developed some more for film cameras. That's a 100-kilo drone there you're looking at right now as takeoff weight. We design and develop everything in-house: CNC, milling, routing, PCB boards, electric plug components, because plugs were melting because there's so much current being drawn. When you're flying in the desert at 40 degrees centigrade, it's very hot. So we developed our own things. So we shot Star Wars. Then we developed another. Upgraded that drone again and carrying the world's biggest, heaviest camera called the Lexus 65. I believe we are the only company in the world, even today, that can fly this camera. And we just did another movie in Mongolia because we're the only company in the world. So they flew us all the way from Melbourne it's hard to get to Mongolia from Melbourne. You gotta change a few flights just to get there. But we were shooting projects there, all of the Mandalorians and all that stuff. You saw lately on the Formula One that there's a drone that can fly as fast as the Formula One, but that's carrying a camera that's only this big. This camera is that big, and it's much more heavier, and it's like 38 kilos. But this is my engineers testing here in Victoria of this drone, flying at 180 kilometers per hour. The world has not seen such things. We have yet to show this to the world properly. That's another bit of tech. I'm keeping it in my pocket. So you don't just develop things. And throw it out to the world. It's about timing as well, and who you show it to. We did a test run of it in Romania on a big movie over there late last year, and it worked perfectly at 140 k's an hour. So we're just pushing the boundaries. And then once I know it's fully promisable, then I'll tell the world that we can use it. So 100-kilo drones, 3 cameras on it.
I might just pause there for 1 second just to also give you a breath, Stephen. As you sort of incrementally get into more innovation and bigger projects and further interest in technology being integrated into the filmmaking, is it, and again, sort of back to the overall theme about Hollywood and Silicon Valley, or perhaps more broadly just defined as sort of, the technology sectors, do you feel as though your teams and their teams very broadly defined as studios, streamers, and everybody else, do you feel as though you're jointly collaborating to think what is possible, or are you more on your side taking the lead and presenting them with what's possible, or are they asking you, Stephen, and your team, can you do this? Have you thought about this? What is the practical nature of the relationship rather than the theoretical at the moment?
The unique thing about Hollywood is every project, every director, they're all so different. There's no, this is what they are. So there's many a times where we're suggesting, and this is possible. There's many a times where we'll listen, and they tell us what they want, and we say, oh, that's possible. What about this? There's many times when they'll also say, I want exactly this, and the machine will look like this. Can you do it? So it's a real mixed bag. they're two different industries. And like I said before, I actually studied engineering. My background is engineering, not film. Somehow I got into this space of film. But because I had an upbringing of not film, when I entered the film space, I was different. I saw things differently. And so I think the trick with Silicon Valley is companies in Silicon Valley need a foot in the door on the other side of the fence. And when they see a problem, they'll see it different solutions. And you see this now with cloud storage and all the rushes going on online and doing all that type of stuff and all the previews and all this type of thing. That's because either someone's foot was in the door, they saw a new solution, or Silicon Valley engaged someone from Hollywood, brought them in as one of their lead tech leads, and they said, "This is what we're doing over there. Can we do this?" So, yeah, I think it's a complete mixed bag.
And relevant to all that is a big topic which has been around for a while, but it's sort of omnipresent at the moment. And sort of a question for both of you, and to introduce James, is budget. Budgets, as you know, in Hollywood have been, at least in my experience, they're very tightly run, and yes, they vary from very small to very large, but. Just not to have you disclose confidential information, but in looking at the screen and having sort of got to know you, strikes me that many of the sort of these items here are, not cheap to deliver. And so I might give you a breath first, Stephen, but just for you, James, as sort of wearing the financier hat and the creator's hat, thinking about, incredible new films and television shows. When you think about budget, which I know you think about a lot, and then with your relationship with Stephen and others, how do you see that interrelationship between people like Stephen thinking as to what's possible, but also having to meet budget?
Oh, look, I think with budgets these days, there's a big chasm, right? So back in the day, there was a lot of, romantic comedies and little independent films. I think since Silicon Valley and tech companies like Netflix and Amazon and Apple have entered the marketplace, I think independent film, there's been a massive gap, and now a lot of films are either made under $5 million, which is helpful for tech influencing those budgets because you can do everything on a lot smaller scale and still get decent production value. But with the bigger budget stuff, like the budgets just keep going up and up and up. Like some of the budgets now are, above $250 million, and that is just absolutely huge. And that, maybe 5-6 years ago, those budgets were sitting around about $100 to $120 million. And so, quickly over the last 5 or 6 years, they've gone up substantially. And really, that is just pretty much the inclusion of technology in filmmaking techniques, because the boundaries keep becoming endless and endless and endless. People like Stephen, he's not Stephen O, he's Stephen Yes, right? That's his nickname, right? And I think that he just says yes to everything because he wants to keep pushing the boundaries, because he knows that there's no real limit to how far you can go. And when you've got studios and streamers backing you with these big budgets, you can keep pushing and pushing and pushing and getting better. And I think, people are starting to get a little bit sick of, the old school VFX saturated films. I think what Stephen brings to it is a lot more real life touch and feel. And you can see that through some of the films that he's done with John Wick and James Bond and stuff like that. This new technology that he's using is actually bringing back the kind of analog touch that people are really looking for and asking for. Because I think there was a moment where, Lucasfilms and those guys just went too far and lost the audience. And so with these new techniques, it's actually keeping it in-camera techniques, not post-camera techniques. So, yeah.
And on that note, James, in my introduction, I referenced your deals with, a very prominent Australian-born actor who works in both giant global big-budget productions as well as in independent productions, some of which you've financed. If you sort of look at those talent requirements, if you will, where they're very, very high and the quality's paramount, how do you think about the relationship with Stephen's groups and just technology overall when you have a budget that is 5 million compared to 250 million, but still needing to embrace technology and innovation?
Well, I think, you know, like I actually have never done a film with Stephen, but can't wait to do one. You know, we have a long friendship. The friendship was built first before professional, you know, interaction. But I think now I'm looking at some other stuff, not just in the film world, but in the TV world. Some of the toys that are coming out of Stephen's kind of innovation lab are now getting applied to a lot lower budget type, you know, shows. So, you know, I've just shot something in the middle of the outback, and I brought Stephen to one of the meetings to meet the other producers and the financier. And, you know, they walked in and said, no, we can't afford this guy. He's got helicopters, he's got off-road buggies, he's got these motorbikes. And I said, no, Stevens, we can afford this if you just let us, you know, have the conversation and look through the right lens, and we'll show you what that lens looks like. And I think, you know, as Stephen said, it's very hard for people to kind of trust you. But once you prove them wrong or prove them and give them evidence, then the mindset changes and better things can happen from a, you know, deliverable perspective, but also a fiscal perspective, right? So, you know, it's lovely to have someone like Stephen in Australia, and particularly Melbourne, to actually encourage this train of thought and thinking to ensure that, you know, it's just not the high-end budget studio streamers that can access him, but it's pretty much the whole spectrum. And I think that will just create better projects, better deliverables, better everything in the long term. And, you know, I think we're, you know, very happy to have him. I always say I don't want to be Brad Pitt, I want to be Stephen O.
Thank you. Brad's got nicer hair then.
Yeah, mate, I'm happy to be you, mate. I see what you do every day.
But, you know, my company, XM2, working on these big projects, you know, when Tom jumped off the cliff, that 30-second odd clip was like tens of lots of millions of dollars just for that 20 odd 30 seconds. So yes, we work on these big projects. The big projects are the enabler of my company to develop technologies, and technologies that are non-existent. That 40-kilo drone needed to fly faster than him on a motocross bike, fully tuned, going as fast as he can, and then hit updrafts of 100 kilometers plus wind speeds and do all this crazy stuff, which you don't know, which hopefully one day I'll get to explain to you, but very technical shot. And we developed lots of stuff. But it doesn't mean we only work on big tentpole projects. The technologies and experience we learned from there, when we bring this, we are actually more valuable to smaller projects because no one has to hold our hands. We don't go there, yeah. Most likely, the conditions on a smaller project is comparable to David Ricciardo parking a car versus him driving at 300 k's an hour down the straight of a Grand Prix somewhere. So because we do the 300 k's an hour, parking the cars sort of easier. So smaller projects, actually we execute much faster. There's no and ahs. We know exactly, we don't need our handheld, and the chance of fast shot acquisition is much higher. But yes, on big projects, yeah, the budgets are big and they're getting bigger. It feels like the bigger projects are getting more budget and the smaller projects are getting less budget.
Correct.
This middle gap that's disappearing, and this is the tasty part, really. But yeah, there's this middle gap that's disappearing.
But it's also like when Apple entered the arena, right? So as soon as Apple came in and provided the right tech for the the home filmmaker, right? So I think tech plays a big part in that for the up and coming guy. And once they graduate, then they can go straight to the studios with a really good catalogue of track record to be able to access that once they're trusted by Hollywood. Yeah.
Silicon Valley actually saves a lot of budget within Hollywood. The technologies might cost more in the initial phase, but eventually it saves a ton load because you can acquire things faster, process things faster. Faster means time is money, and you see it everywhere. How the data that comes out of the camera and how that's processed, all of that ultimately is coming from Silicon Valley.
Yep. I was going to ask on that note, Stephen, the content that we've been enjoying today and the remarks we've been also enjoying has principally been specific to the actual filming. And as you know, only too well, that sort of Hollywood content land is sort of defined as what happens before filming commences. It is defined also as what happens during filming, and these days, and I guess for a long time also, what happens when filming is complete. So I guess just two-part question again on the sort of thematic of Hollywood and Silicon Valley, but also your observations overall as to where the industry's at, but also specific to your company. Where is technology helping the most, whether it's in terms of innovation, cost savings, fan enjoyment or otherwise? Is it by virtue of where technology's at before filming, during filming or after filming, or is it actually just the consolidated, integrated sort of supply chain, if you will?
Sorry for this answer, but I think it's the whole lot. It affects every single part it needs to affect every single part. You can't just have advancement in one part of that three and expect great outcomes. It needs to be paired up with the from start to finish. Sorry, lost my train of thought. But where we are today, I think this is just the infancy. I think with technology moving forward, is going to be like craziness. Crazy to the level where maybe there's less physical stuff that's happening, but it'll be better physical stuff that's happening. There'll be a lot of more higher quality in studio contents or dramas and your romantic comedies. How good were they in the past? You sort of disappeared.
Don't exist.
Isn't it? No. But this movie, and I'd love to show you this little video of the clip of our making of this. But this is getting back into that old romantic type of comedy type of thing, right? There's action and that old style. That was only enabled because of technologies. Advancements from pre, during, and after to let this enable. I'll play this. Have a look. These are all the components of what we did. A little camera on the bottom left. It's a big camera, actually. There's a person sitting in that car rolling around 8.5 times that broke a world record. And he walked out. He was a little bit dazed, but he walked out of it.
Was the plan to break the world record?
Yes, 100%. There was Guinness people there and everything. Slider systems, all these things is what we've developed.
Ryan Gosling has the smouldering looks that can stop traffic. Normally, that is just an expression. A motorbike, several cameras inside a moving car. Very few can steal the bridge's limelight like this man.
All this type of multi-camera technology is also, I believe we are the only ones that had this level of
drone zipped along the bridge too.
I think we were the first company to fly a drone on Sydney Harbour Bridge officially with permits.
So, Stephen, at what stage do you come in the development process to kind of map all that out with the director and the producers and the creatives?
That also changes from project to project. On some projects like John Wick, we were speaking with the director 1.5 years prior to starting of the filming. Sometimes
and what's the script like at that stage? Is there a script?
Oh, there's a script, and then the script gets changed to our capabilities. Back in the day, filmmaking was, okay, this is the picture that I want to capture and figure out how to make the equipment to make it so that you can capture it. But now, through developed technologies or knowledge of what's possible, and us pairing up with directors as such, we can say, that's possible, this is possible. Then they write the story based on what's possible, because that's cheaper. and there's less risk. So, and I think producers around the world also are looking at Silicon Valley or develop technologies of what's possible around the corner, and all sort of little itchy to actually use it. But it's like the penguin parade down at Phillip Island. None of those penguins want to come out of the water first. It takes one with a bit of guts to come out first, and then all the other ones start following. It's the same thing. I think Hollywood is like that. So it's hard to penetrate Hollywood, but if you have the determination and the guts to go for it, you have a good chance in getting in there. And I think that's more evident with Silicon Valley as well. Great idea, and then you start pushing it in there. Even my company right now, I'm starting to put some ink to paper right now, but I have this concept in my brain that's going to flip Hollywood on its head. And it's not this physical filming stuff. It's actually got AI involved. It's got things to do with lighting and all these other bits and bobs, and I'm going to just get it out here. It's just been a bit busy. And yeah, if you want to invest some money, let me know. It's going to flip it on its head for sure. I spoke to 3 very, very high people within the Hollywood space about this technology, and their jaw was on the table. And yeah, so anyway, bit of fun. That's my plug for the day.
I've already written the check.
Just a final question for both of you, just conscious it's approaching 1 p.m. So Stephen, just what's you heard me mention Larry Ellison and Family Structures acquiring Paramount Global and CBS. What's your overall reaction to a software company buying a 100-year-old Hollywood movie studio?
I think that's magic. I think it's magic because it's like what we've been saying all this morning. It's a new set of eyes looking into this existing old space. When did Hollywood start, you said before?
Yeah, our first studio 1911, but principally the majors all commenced trading in the 1920s.
Yeah, so that's 100 years, right? So over 100 years, you've had this very similar set of eyes looking at the whole industry. Now a software company entering that space will look at that industry with a complete new set of glasses. They've got different filters. They haven't got the mindset where, I've seen that before, don't worry about that. They will have an exploratory mind. So the knowledge and the experience and the tech that they have, and then when they look at Hollywood, I can sprinkle that a bit of there, and I can put a bit of that over here, and if we mix those two together, you're going to get this. New dishes will come. There'll be a new restaurant on Little Burke Street in the city, and there'll be new flavors to taste and enjoy. Because really, like James was saying, the world got a little bit bored of what Hollywood was producing. I remember when I was young, I loved to go to movies. Nowadays, it's like, no. But I think this software company entering into this Hollywood space in such a with a big presence is going to make a difference.
Thank you, Stephen. And James, just last question for you, bearing in mind we are on campus at university, and there are students here that study various forms of innovation and technology as well as filmmaking and the arts at VCA. What is your advice to students and young and old that are seeking to get into this incredibly exciting set of sort of integrated industries? Is it move to America?
I'd definitely move to America. If you've got talent, money, or relationships, get to America. But if you're starting off as a writer or director, work out the easiest pathway or the least path of resistance to proving your skill set. Because a lot of people come out with massive ideas and big dreams, and that is never going to be supported by Hollywood for a first-timer, right? Unless they write some amazing script that they give to someone who ends up in Hollywood's hands. But just prove yourself on small scale, because you can do it on small scale, be recognised by the big scale, being studio streamers and stuff. We are working with a director at the moment. He did a film during COVID for $50,000, pretty much shot over the internet on an iPhone. It was seen by Hollywood. It was a success, and now he's gone on to be one of Hollywood's current biggest horror directors. So he's getting budgets plus or north of $30-40 million now. But that started 4 years ago. And, the quick rise to fame, can happen pretty quickly if you nail it on a small scale, because it's pretty much the execution of the idea. It's not the execution of the budget and the money. It's the idea itself. And then if that stands head and shoulders above the rest, then people can identify that pretty quickly and say, hey, this kid's got talent, put him in the picture.
That's very good advice. Thank you, James. I feel we've barely scratched the surface of how these two incredible communities are integrating and have integrated, but it's been fascinating. But to both of you, I just, feel like a very proud Australian, sitting between both of you as you accomplish great things in the United States and in Hollywood. So best wishes with your future endeavours, and thank you very much for those of you that are here in person. Thank you for sitting with us, and those of you that are at home or in your offices, I hope you've enjoyed it. So on behalf of EMT and Melbourne Connect, thank you. We'll call it a day.
Thank you, Trent.
Thank you.